crater.
As you come around there, there's a rock in the near field on this rim that has some white on the top of it. We'd like you to...
There's a photograph sitting on the moon right now. It's been there for over 50 years, face up on the gray dust of the Descartes Highlands, under 2 weeks of unfiltered sunlight and 2 weeks of absolute darkness, in a place where the temperature swings 500 degrees Fahrenheit between noon and midnight, in a vacuum so pure that nothing decays and nothing breathes. In the photo, a woman, 2 small boys, and a man in a flight suit, smiling, a family on a Sunday afternoon somewhere in Texas. On the back, in handwriting, someone wrote, "This is the family of astronaut Duke from planet Earth. Landed on the moon, April 1972. Charlie Duke left that photo there on purpose, and for years, he talked about it like it was a beautiful thing, a message in a bottle flung into eternity. But here's what he didn't talk about, not for a long time, what it felt like to come back. April 1972. The space race is technically over. Neil Armstrong walked on the moon in 1969, and Alan Shepard. By the time Apollo 16 rolled onto the launch pad, NASA had already sent 9 men to the lunar surface and brought them all home. The country had moved on. Vietnam was dominating the headlines. Nixon was heading to China, and the word Apollo no longer stopped traffic, which means the 11 men who walked on the moon after Armstrong did so in a strange kind of shadow. Celebrated, yes, but already a little forgotten. Already competing with their own mythology. Charles Moss Duke Jr. was 36 years old when Apollo 16 launched. He grew up in Lancaster, South Carolina, the son of a bank president. Quiet kid, Navy brat. He'd earned degrees from the Naval Academy and MIT, flown jets off aircraft carriers, and tested experimental aircraft before NASA even called his name. By every measure, he was exactly the kind of person the space program was built to produce. Disciplined, technically brilliant, emotionally contained. But Charlie Duke carried something into that mission that no amount of training could have prepared him for. He was afraid, not of the rocket, not of the vacuum. He was afraid of what the moon might make him feel. Apollo 16 launched on April 16, 1972, and it almost didn't launch at all. The crew? Commander John Young, one of NASA's most experienced astronauts, a man so legendarily unflappable that engineers called him the astronaut's astronaut. Command Module pilot Ken Mattingly, who you might remember as the man pulled from Apollo 13 for measles exposure, except the person who'd inadvertently exposed him was Charlie Duke. Now they were flying together. There's something almost novelistic about that. And Duke himself, assigned as Lunar Module pilot, the youngest human being ever to reach the moon's surface. The mission's target was the Descartes Highlands, a rugged upland region that geologists believe might be made of ancient volcanic rock. If they were right, it would rewrite everything we thought we knew about the moon's history. If they were wrong, and they were, it turned out, it would still be the most ambitious geological expedition in human history. The Saturn V left Earth at 12:54 p.m. Eastern Time. 3 men sealed inside a capsule smaller than a studio apartment, balanced on 7.5 million pounds of thrust, climbing out of the atmosphere at 25,000 miles per hour. Duke later said the launch felt like being inside an earthquake that wanted to become a spaceship. April 20th. The lunar module Orion has just entered lunar orbit. This is where the mission almost ended. As Young and Duke prepared to undock from Mattingly and begin their descent, a problem emerged in the command module's backup steering system, a malfunction that, under certain emergency conditions, could have stranded them all in orbit. The kind of quiet that people who've worked in mission control say is the loudest sound in the world. For 6 hours, NASA evaluated the risk. Duke and Young sat in Orion, fully suited, waiting. You spend your whole career chasing this moment. 400,000 people working toward this single afternoon. and then you wait for someone in Houston to decide whether the math clears. It cleared, just barely. They undocked, they descended, and at 9:23 p.m. Eastern, on April 20th, 1972, the Orion touched down in the Descartes Highlands, so gently that Duke said he barely felt it. He looked out the window, gray, crater-pocked, bathed in a light that exists nowhere else in the universe, sunlight with no atmosphere to filter it, falling on a surface with no color to absorb it. He said, "Fantastic, wild, and it's a great rocks field," which is exactly the thing a geologist astronaut says when he lands on the moon. But then the radio caught something else, something quieter, almost involuntary, a breath, the sound of a man realizing where he was. Charlie Duke was on the moon for 71 hours and 14 minutes. In that time, he and John Young drove their lunar rover nearly 27 kilometers across the surface, farther from the landing site than any humans before them. They climbed Stone Mountain, they sampled craters, they collected 211 pounds of rock. They did the things that geologists dream about, in the same way that poets dream about standing at the edge of the ocean. But Duke has said, privately and eventually publicly, that what he remembers most is none of that. What he remembers is the silence, not just the absence of sound, though that is absolute on the moon. There is no air to carry vibration, no ambient noise, no wind. What Duke means is the silence inside his own head. For the first time in his life, something had turned the volume down on everything that wasn't right in front of him. No past, no future. Just the gray dust and the black sky and the earth, hanging above the horizon, like something someone had placed there to make a point. He was looking at his home from 238,855 miles away, and it fit inside his fist. He placed the family photo in the dust on their third EVA, their last day on the surface. His wife, Dorothy, his sons, Charles, who was 7, and Thomas, who was 5. He pressed it into the regolith so it would stay flat, then stepped back and photographed it. Officially, it was a personal memento, a gesture. Unofficially, it was a man trying to close a distance he couldn't name. The photo is still there. It's faded now. Decades of unfiltered solar radiation will do that. But the image is probably still legible. Still a family, still smiling, in a place no other family has ever been. Duke has said that leaving it felt like leaving a piece of himself. He didn't realize, not yet, how accurate that was. Apollo 16 splashed down on April 27, 1972. The crew was recovered. The rocks were catalogued. The press conferences were held. The ticker tape parade moved through the streets. And then it was over. Duke returned to a world that had a place for former astronaut, but no template for what comes after the moon. What do you do on Tuesday when you have already done the most extraordinary thing a human being has ever done? Where do you point that need for significance? He tried the Air Force. He tried business. He tried the lecture circuit. None of it held. What Duke has been honest about, later, after enough time had passed to make honesty survivable, is that the years after Apollo nearly broke him. His marriage to Dorothy deteriorated. She struggled with depression so severe she was hospitalized. He was physically present, but emotionally somewhere else, chasing something he couldn't even describe. The moon had cracked him open, and nothing he tried could close the gap. He was 36 when he landed on the moon. He was 40 when he started to feel like he might not survive the landing. The Apollo program cost approximately $25 billion, roughly $180 billion in today's money. NASA counted that cost carefully. Nobody was counting this one. In 1978, 6 years after Apollo 16, Charles Duke became a born-again Christian. He doesn't hide this. He talks about it openly, in the same matter-of-fact way he talks about trajectory calculations and rock samples. He says it saved his marriage. He says it saved his life. He and Dorothy have been married for over 50 years now. They travel together, they speak together. Whatever was cracked open, they found a way to fill it. Duke is one of only 4 living moonwalkers as of today. He is 88 years old. When he speaks about the moon now, and he does speak about it, often, at schools and churches and aerospace conferences, he doesn't lead with the rover distances or the geological samples. He leads with the photograph. He leads with the family. He has said, "I don't know what condition that photo is in now. The sun has probably bleached it, but it's there. It'll be there longer than anything else I ever do." The Descartes Highlands samples that he and John Young collected eventually proved that the region was not volcanic. It was formed by ancient impact events billions of years ago. The geology was wrong. The mission was still transformative. Science doesn't always find what it's looking for. Sometimes it finds what it didn't know to look for. Duke brought back 211 pounds of rock that permanently changed our understanding of the early solar system. He also brought back something no instrument could measure, and spent years figuring out what to do with it. There's a version of this story where the photograph is the whole point. Man walks on the moon, leaves a picture of his family. The image is poetry, self-contained, complete. It lands on the front page, it goes in the history books, it gets stitched on a commemorative patch. Beautiful. Done. But the real story is longer. The real story is that Charlie Duke came back. He came back to a world that had no language for what he'd seen. He came back to a wolf who needed him to be present in a way that the moon had made harder, not easier. He came back carrying the weight of a moment so enormous that ordinary Tuesday mornings couldn't hold it. And he spent the next decade learning, slowly, painfully, quietly, how to live inside a life that would always feel slightly too small for what he'd experienced. Every astronaut who walked on the moon came back changed. Some talked about it. Some didn't. Some found peace. Some found God. Some found neither and disappeared into careers in silence. What unites them is that the moon is not something you go to and return from unchanged. It reconfigures you. It shows you the Earth from far enough away that you can never quite unsee it. The photograph sitting in the Descartes Highlands will outlast every human being alive today. It will outlast the pyramids. It will outlast most of the things we consider permanent. In 1,000,000 years, if nothing disturbs it, someone or something might find a laminated square on a gray plane with 4 smiling people on it and wonder what the gesture meant. Charlie Duke knows what it meant. He's been figuring it out for 50 years. He left his family on the moon because that was the only way to take the moon home with him. And maybe that's the thing about going somewhere no one has gone. You can't fully bring it back. You can only leave a piece of yourself behind and spend the rest of your life deciding what that trade was worth.